How's it going, guys? My name is Jesse, and I just wanted to go over the patch and the new cross splits, or well, the new patch for the cross splits game. For anyone who doesn't know cross splits, it's a unique RPG deck builder featuring fast-paced tactical combat with loads of cards to collect and singes to wield. So, anyone who's into Yu-Gi-Oh, the and it most of the TCCs um, would probably enjoy this. I heard about it. I saw a couple of people playing it, like Jorbs and the like, who through sponsorships, and it caught my fancy because I'm into playing Slay the Spire, and there is a roguelike element to, or a roguelike version or game type on CrossBlitz where you quite similar to Slay the Spire, climb the spire. Slowly start off with a very basic deck, pick a strategy, and you can enforce that strategy and see it carried through. And yeah, I think it's I've been really enjoying it. As you can see, I've got nearly 28 hours, or, just over 27 hours on it. So I'd like to think that I could give some more informed feedback because there was says here a major update with patch notes 0.6.11. The game is still, I think, very much in early access. There's still elements, still some glitches, but actually this patch note, I was no idea. I didn't think I saw the roadmap a week or so ago. The developers have just had an AMA on Reddit a couple of days ago as well, which is probably worth checking out, and I probably will check out soon. Maybe record another video for that. But the one thing I did want to get to was I thought on the roadmap there's going to be no big updates till the new year. I believe in the first quarter they've got new characters coming, which I'm excited for. But I was specifically looking at the roguelike element. It's called the Tusk Tales game mode, and I just wanted to go over some bug fix the patch notes because there's a lot of bug fixes. These are the accolades and battles, and there was a lot of glitches and things bugging out. Unfortunately I wasn't able to play the game for the last couple of days. I don't know whether my computer was just not having it. But the game just wouldn't load. I hadn't touched anything. Tried booting up the game. Nope, couldn't play it. Couldn't get past the first loading screen. So it is working now. There, it even says it here actually. System fixed a bug that caused an infinite loading screen on some machines, some Windows machines when the game started. And then unlucky to the people who suffered this. So I just wanted to go over that, give my thoughts on the updates because the improvements are really good, and I'm glad the developers are listening. It seems like a tight knit community. Even on the Reddit, there's only about 100 people, 100 members. The Discord seems to be quite closely knit. As of this recording, I'm the second most watched and streamed Twitch streamer who plays the game at the moment. And I can't really get enough of it. There's bits and pieces that are annoying, but they will be addressed. I probably will speak about some of them as we go through. So I just want to get to a number of fixes. If you want to see these the actual patch notes themselves in detail, I will provide a link in the description, and you're welcome as well to sub for more because I'm probably going to cover. Now that I know there's some definite updates coming through, and it looks like they are going to be how should I say they are going to be come through quite often. I probably will cover this in more detail. So there was just new grade requirements for the S ranking. There were certain challenges that needed you to get an S ranking, but it wasn't clear as to what you actually needed. And the devs did speak on this, but they have given better. They have given more detail now because they've updated the S rank criteria for Tusk Tales by replacing the previous campfire requirement with an overkill requirement. So previously you weren't allowed to, I think, use a campfire in any form. And the funny thing, that they mentioned here is that they've taken away the armor thing. At the campfire, you normally got three options, so you could heal, and it gave max HP as well. You could gain a new card in your hand, which was a new card in your deck, sorry, which was a healer that, when played, heals you during the game. So it's like a better sustain, which I never used. I didn't want to add just one random healer that didn't fit the archetype of my deck. And then you could add armor. And to be fair, I think I've got Slayer Spy stuck in my brain where the healing, you just heal a portion, but it actually healed and add max HP. So it's could be regarded as far more beneficial. And then the other option was it added 5 like plate armor, 5 armor that carried on into the next game, and I always just clicked on that. But it counts as using the bonfire. So I haven't yet had any S ranks. I've not been going for S ranks. I have played some challenge runs, but I think the reason as to why as well is it comes up here is that the max now. The max that you can add on, you can click certain challenges. One of the challenges, for example, on one of the run throughs is every enemy starts with +10 armor on their life, which to me just drew the game out a lot longer than it. Like that isn't necessarily a challenge, more than just a slogfest in my eyes. Similar to where people say, "Oh, the game difficulty has been increased," and all they've done is up the damage numbers and the health pool in games like Diablo and stuff. It's not necessarily a challenge because the same mechanics you're using will still work. It'll just take slightly longer. It feels more like a delay tactic. But these two, I think this will address it and make me want to actually properly get into the challenges. Right now, I'm 3/4 of the way through the available Tusk Tales campaign. Using the variety of different decks, and now it's going to give better payments, it seems, which I'm looking forward to testing out. And also the Tusk Tales removing the last 2 rows before the boss across all runs to make it slightly shorter. Big W, a big time save there, because similar to sort of Slay Spire, as I'll keep referring back to, hopefully not to annoy you, but just to give you some background for the Slay Spire players out there. By the end boss, the runs typically when I was streaming them went on for about 2 hours, and this is due to sometimes the difficulty. Sometimes you had to make good plays in matches, but generally you had an archetype down, and then the last couple of fights were just, I don't know, they were just, again, as maybe I need a better term than slogfest, but they were just sort of delays. There was no need to them because they didn't do anything. You weren't going to add cards to your deck because by then your deck I was getting to decks of about 30 or 40, 30 to 40 card size. So my decks were getting very bloated. I didn't want to add anything. I didn't gain anything from going into the fights. And of course, it wouldn't add, they call it husks. This is like the in-between game currency that you use to upgrade your mercenary and your deck types and buy other mercenaries to improve your the general power of your character. Yeah, the last couple of fights didn't really do anything. You were trying to get through to the final fight, which on most of the runs was a very different one. I'm thinking mainly the Leviathan, which has a starting relic that normally the game ticks up like +1 mana, +2 mana, +3 mana, but the Leviathan especially, it starts you off at 5 mana, which is basically close to end game. 5 mana in a starting hand, 5 or 6 mana in your starting hand means you can more or less lay any unit that you draw straight away. And the decks that I was playing were low cost rush. So anyway, a +1 there. Mulligan being slightly better at the beginning of the game, again, very useful, especially towards the end of. I'm going to speak mainly from a Tusk Tales point of view. By the end, when you've got a 30 or 40 card deck, I don't know whether it's the optimal way to play. It's the way I play anyway. Being able to draw more at the beginning, very nice. Trick book now be equipped to anything. Yeah, this is another nice addition because again they've gone with the feedback that. Sorry, it's distracting me. They've gone with the feedback that only spells could get this. So, Trick Book, which gives you a +1 draw on playing it, they've now allowed you to add it to any kind of card. And first, normally what it used to be was that you could only add it on spells. So you get a +1 draw. There's Grog, which is a 1 mana cost card that gave you +1 draw anyway, so making that +2. And then there weren't many other spells, depending on what deck type you played. I played a lot of the poison deck, so there was quite a few spells that I did utilize, but it made no sense because if you played a damage spell, you'd kind of most of the time you'd want to upgrade it with +1 damage to make it more effective, and occasionally you'd want to add the +1 draw on any spells. So the fact that you can now add this on any card, equips to anything that has a damage ability instead of as well. The fact you can add it on to a wide variety again could be quite good, and also helps if you do have the smaller deck type. to get through your cards quicker, depending on what your strategy is. If it depends on one certain unit and you've only got one card, or your hero that you only ever have one of, that can sometimes you don't even draw for 10 minutes, 15 minutes into the battle. So where are we now? Oh, the option sets up to 3 cards each faction from set from battle rewards. This is really nice as well. Players now have the option. I haven't actually tested this, but again, this follows the same kind of logic that when you defeat an opponent, you were able to. Firstly, they've removed the forced having to take a card mechanic, which was kind of forced on you for the first part of a run. But now they've got the players now have the option to select up to 3 cards from each faction from the battle rewards. I interpret this as when you defeat an opponent, you got a choice of 3 cards that you could add to your deck, or sometimes up to 6 cards that you could add to your deck. A choice between them, and then you could add being able to add multiple copies of one card really helps establish that archetype. Because before you would only add one, so you might be able to get a very powerful card, or you might add one that does a certain synergy that actually quite helps your deck. But just being able to only get one of them, if you've got a deck of 30, and your chances of actually drawing said card or it for being useful was actually very slim. Battle speed toggle is down the game's UI, making it more noticeable for new players. W there. Before it was only in the accessibility settings. If anyone who's tried out the game and didn't know about this, the battle speed can I believe be put up to ×2 in the accessibility settings. I would highly recommend this because matches were dragging on with so many card effects. Again, it's one of the plus and minus with so many card effects. It was making that you'd lay a card, you'd enter the battle phase, and effects would happen. You'd enter the card phase, and effects would happen. Just one moment. Professional recording going on there. But we've got a baby who's sleeping and having a rough day, so I don't want to affect their sleep. And of course, my partner who's taking care of them. Where was I now? Yeah, sorry, we were going back to the game speed. So with the game speed, you'd have a lot of you'd have sometimes your relics going off on the side, and you'd have 4 of them, up to 4 of them that could take effect. You'd have the enemy's relics, you'd have the enemy's cards, all have different effects. There's combat start cards. So the matches and the turns were taking sometimes so long because of all the animations. I don't think there's an animation to turn it off. And then you had the reverse problem that when you cranked up the game speed, which I'll get to in a moment as well, when you made it ×2, the game became a lot more playable, but sometimes the enemy would play a spell card that you may never have seen before that would wipe your board, and you'd be like, oh, what just happened? How did they do that? You look away, look back at your board, and suddenly your board has been melted. There was no way to kind of establish what they'd done. You just be like, oh, I guess just played a spell card or did something. Well, okay. Skip melt cutscene now starts enabled. I believe I haven't played the Fables, the storyline much. I gave it half an hour go and realized it's just not for me. Clearly the people like the storyline, good for them. I hope they enjoy it. But I believe on creation, when you could make the cards that you wanted in the storyline, I believe there was an animation that played for the blacksmith who created your cards, and that was taking up a lot of time. And now that is being disabled by default, it looks like. So again, it seems to be pretty nice. So bans appear on the map immediately after being accepted and are guaranteed to be accessible. Again, with the Tusk Tales, sorry, go back to this one. Balanced playstyle is now renamed flexible. Okay, the balanced deck is an enjoyable deck. These both seem name it what you want. Fine. Make it the main thing is the mechanics over naming and story, but fine. Tusk Tales advances will appear on the map immediately after being accepted and guaranteed to be accessible via a path the player can navigate. So developers' notes, sorry. We've taken note of the annoyance caused by having to restart a run to claim a bounty. The update significantly improves accessibility and convenience. Campfires now. Yeah. So This was another. I don't know. I didn't mind this one. This never really bothered me. So there's certain tiles on the map as you're navigating your way through. You could go to a bounty guild, and then there are upgrade stations that you could add. Well, they're called trinkets in this game, but you can essence pick a card or a unit. You can pick a card in your deck and slowly add additional abilities to it. So your melee unit or any of your monster cards, you could add tough to them. You could add flying to them. You could give them additional effects. Again, another reason why I like the game. And then to get better effects or to unlock different abilities. Like at the beginning, you could just get a +1 damage, +1 health. You have to complete bounties. So killing a certain unit gives you like the flying effect, for example, or killing the tough effects. So I didn't actually mind this. It kind of, I guess, for the completionists, or if you were hunting a specific effect like tough or whatever, depending on what you wanted your deck types to do. I don't know. I found that for me, I was going to play more runs of Tusk Tales. This didn't affect me specifically. It was annoying every now and then because what I would find was there was nowhere that it told you what your bounty was. You go in, you accept your bounty, and then again you then have a 20-minute duel, or a half an hour later, you completely forgot that you'd even accepted a bounty, or there was nowhere that reminded you at the side of the screen, or what's your current task. It just eventually it would appear again on the map, and I'd be like, oh, bounty, and then you go and fight the thing that was you were bounted. Half the time I didn't even know I had a bounty on. Once I do, 5 minutes later, it's out of your brain. So where are we now? Adjust your completion requirements across all Tusk Tale locations. I'm hoping. I haven't checked what this is. I might do. I'm going to stream this tonight and be streaming from 9 p.m. GMT. But the link to the stream will be below. I'm hoping this means one of my gripes with the game was the completion requirements. You couldn't unlock a new area unless it kind of, on the one hand, it forced you to play certain card types. So you do a run in a certain area with a certain boss, and then you assume that if you beat the area with whatever deck type you're using, you unlock the next area because you've beaten the boss. Well, this only works in the first area as like a sort of like a tutorial thing. Eventually, what happened is it gave completion requirements that you had to beat, the next area or the third. To get to the third area, you had to beat like a second area with two different deck types, two specific deck types. So not only did you have to play the first area a bunch of times to accrue husks, to buy the mercenaries, and it wasn't clear that those were the mercenaries that you needed. It wasn't, go here, buy this, then complete the game. There was a bit of puzzle element to it as well, or I don't know, a misleading element. Because what happened to me, I'd like to think, I have at least one brain cell, is that I really enjoyed the poison elf game type. If you look at the other videos on my channel, you can see I really enjoyed the poison elf deck type, but that was that I unlocked more or less straight away. But it wasn't until I played through that like 3 or 4 times, and then I earned a bunch of fuss, unlocked sort of everything I could, but I couldn't progress anywhere, and that was because you had to beat certain areas with very specific decks. So I was finding that, it was forcing me to use other deck types, which I don't like being told what to do by games. I prefer to do my own thing, but at the same time, being forced to do that next game type, being forced to use a different deck, barring the draconic deck, the spellcastery type deck, which I don't know, that deck kind of, you need to buy all the additionals. So to cut a long story short, I'm hoping this is you can use whatever game type, whatever deck type that you find fun. I.e., for me, it was a poison elf deck, and you can beat the game with it. I understand that why the devs probably wouldn't want you to immediately do that, because you'd miss out on a lot of content, and there are a lot of other decks, and all the decks are viable, which is one of the big pluses to the game as well. There's nothing that's clearly overpowered, and even if it is, it doesn't matter, because it's I believe so far it's an offline game. But hopefully this has now been changed. So campfires will now offer the same 3 options with the removal of armor choice. This is funny to me because I only ever pick the armor choice most of the time. I didn't realize that the healing health type also gave you plus max HP. So we realized reaching campfire and not finding an option you were aiming for is a frustrating experience. Therefore, we've eliminated the least rewarding and the least used rewarding option, the armor choice, to streamline and so I was doing it again. I was doing it the wrong way. So the make a friend choice has been reworked, enabling players to select and duplicate a card in their deck. Amazing. Helps if you want to establish an archetype. Probably quite powerful if you've got one or two very powerful cards. Like there's 8-cost mana cards that would be amazing to get more and more of. Because then it would make you want to target campfires to keep that deck type going. There's no point trying to build a deck around one card, i.e. the hero. I don't know whether it's probably worth testing whether this means you can duplicate your hero. Doubtful, because then it's not just one hero, it's many. But there's certain, I don't know, more freedom of choice could be good. Tusk Tales prices in card shops have been lowered for all card rarities. Cool. Card shops now ×3 of every rarity, removing the previous limitations based on rarity. Again, quite helpful. There's probably going to be more broken synergies that you can establish because depending on the rarity of the card, there's a lot less available. It kind of makes sense on the one half, but also if you're trying to build a synergy around certain types or a certain spell type in your deck or a certain effect, it was very hard to sort of pull off unless you were lucky that you ran into one or two cards consistently. New system updates. The speed can be set at 1.5. I believe that's in between because the previous accessibility setting was 2, so now it can be set at 1.5. Again, might be useful to some. And added a tooltip for Glimmer when hovering over your own or your opponent's Glimmer in battle. You can see additional information. Again, useful because it took me a while to even realize what Glimmer was. For anyone who doesn't even know the term Glimmer, it's a type of money which also acts as armor, and certain cards use it as payment as well. It's within battle. This is so there's a certain deck type that uses Glimmer, stacks it up at the side, and then there was many occasions when I first started that I would be supposed to be doing like health damage, like direct damage to the enemy hero, but because they had Glimmer and a couple of spell cards that gained them like 10 Glimmer, nothing would happen for a couple of rounds. So a tooltip for that is amazing. More information for the player I'm in support of. Added functionality to hover over cards in the history panel to view card details. There's now a graveyard and banish panel. And then not seeing the packs and labels sounds good. But yeah, these two together, another big one, because as I was saying before, the game wasn't necessarily fun to play on 1 time speed. If you had the time, cool, play on one, you do you. But for me, it became frustrating because as the matches went on, once you've got 2 or 3 things on the field, and then both you and your opponent do, card effects would activate, damage would activate. Every time you killed something, an effect would activate, especially in the early game. And the matches were dragging on so long. Even in the early game, having a 20-minute match just to get through the beginning fights was very annoying. But then in the reverse, when you were in the late game and you started going up against bosses and things, sometimes you needed to establish on some occasions an exact strategy, or you need to save. If you don't learn what the cards the enemy has, then how do you know how to kind of adequately prepare yourself? How do you get better at the game if you don't know what you're facing? So on 2 times speed, the enemy would sometimes play board wiping cards or spells, especially later on, and you had no idea what they really did. You just saw a bunch of your units die after they played a card. Maybe it was a unit that did that, maybe it was a spell card. You'd go back and look in the panel, and it just said, enemy played this and this happened, and it was like, okay, but what did the actual card do? So I interpret that as more information to the player, and you can actually see what the cards do. You can read about it. I can read about it far quicker than I can sit there watching a ×1 speed activation on the card. So another big W there. Fables, Red Cross, Fables, Violet. So a bunch of changes to the accolades, I believe, throughout the Fables, which is the story mode for the game. This one day might affect me. I might go back and actually play the Fables at some point, but I saw everyone and their mum playing this, sponsored content wise, so I wasn't fussed everyone had played the first hour or two of the Fables, so I wasn't, I wasn't doing anything new there. So the new card type, I'm gonna skip these. I've not. This is the deck I was talking about. Being forced to play this deck when I wasn't able to unlock all the cards for it. I don't know. I just lost a bunch of times, and it wasn't enjoyable to me, especially when I'd spent a couple of hours fully unlocking and buying all the upgrades for the poison deck. So your Serpent Song can target the enemy hero. Adding Serpent Song to your hand reduces cost by 1. Again, if this makes that deck slightly better, then cool. You can target the enemy hero. Your Serpent Songs add 1 to your hand. Your Serpent Songs can target the enemy hero this turn. Add 1 to your hand. So you can target all your Serpents can target. Add 1 to your hand. Okay. There's probably a difference in wording there that I'm just not seeing from the get-go. But again, I rarely play this deck, so it doesn't really have an effect on me, and I've rarely gone against it as well. Right, this is a huge, I say huge change as if but you know what I mean. There's the reason why I mention this is both the Leviathan, one of the early act bosses, or the Act 2 boss, I should say, and I don't know who else. Maybe other certain people have it, but there's a hard mode elite or deadly battle they call it early on. Like you're only 2 or 3 fights in, and then you go against a blood shark where the hero is blood shark, i.e. eventually they're going to play this card, and then we'll get to it later on. They've changed the relic as well. So in essence, the gimmick of this was they'd lay this card and it would slowly devour everything in your deck, and it would slowly just kill all units. And it's on battles, it's on combat start. It's not just when you lay this card, it will chomp a unit, which is how I thought it would work, or thought it should work. It was every turn this unit is going to slowly get stronger and stronger. Again, it's a very high cost card, fair enough. But if this landed and then sucked out, or it devoured, I should say, one of your 8 mana costs cards and gained +6 damage, +6 health, you had basically no way of killing it, barring with the poison deck, barring certain specific cards that would always one shot it. You would be able to damage it. I believe it's still tough. Yeah, so it takes even less damage from everything, which is insane considering it's very hard to kill. So the developers note here, while not overly dominant, felt unfair to most players. To address this, we've introduced a condition where Bloodshark can devour minions that cost 3 or less. This adjustment aims to balance the card's overall feel, making it feel fair in gameplay. The changes offers significant value for mill strategies which aim to get the opponent into fatigue. So fatigue is when they run out of cards in their deck, they slowly take damage, and it's significant damage as well once they're drawing no cards. Once they can't draw cards, you take damage instead. Yeah, this is a really nice change, because I would always skip on the hard mode Tusk Tales. I'd just skip this fight, because you imagine this in relic form as well. On combat start, one of your minions just got killed. It ended that if you didn't draw certain cards, get very specific cards or have a very specific deck, there's nothing you could do. You would eventually run out of all cards because you'd only draw spells or whatever, because all your minions were getting devoured. And then there was a relic that more or less did the same thing. Bear with me, I'll just scroll back. There we go. So this hopefully should make that deadly fight a lot easier to do. I never actually played with this unit. I'm sure you can. Again, Poison Elf and the balance / flexible deck are my two most played card deck types, archetypes, whatever you want to call them. So excellent there. Cinnamon Monkey, now it's Hothead, fires cannon, and can also target the enemy hero. So before they gave it fleeting, so in essence they've made it a lot more defensive, or it'd be a tiny bit more defensive, because initially you laid it had Hothead and fleeting. So Hothead means if there's a monster in your column, you've got 2 columns on their side, 2 columns on your side. You laid it down, you instantly attacked. You didn't have to wait for combat start, and it's only a 1/1, but you could chip away at something. You could save this for a couple of rounds. Maybe they lay a certain unit. And then you could instantly just blast that certain unit, and then so they've made a slight change to it. The difference now is that it doesn't 100% die on attack. So there are ways you can buff. There's certain cards that buff lower cost units. So maybe the Cindersoot monkey meta is here. Doubtful, but yeah. I've never played. I've never seen or played this. Maybe this is further on, so I don't know. I don't know. I can't really comment on this one. I've not really played around with traps as of yet. Any minions summoned, give a random minion's death. After any minions played, give it a random minion's death. Yeah, never take death dice. Just never take death dice. It's an infuriating mechanic, especially well, unless your archetype, your deck type is the draconic and the zombies that give +1/+1 or spawn more things on the field. But there's certain enemy bosses that do really well. I misinterpreted, and I'm sure many people did, that it's just you. When you pick up a relic, you can buy relics and upgrade yourself, your full character during the run. I thought this was any minion that you summoned gained this, which would be very, very powerful, but it's every minion on the board, and certain deck types spam low-cost units that even when you killed them, like for example, there's the zombie that gives +1/+1 to another unit nearby on its side of the field. It just ended that you kill this unit, you give a +1/+1 to someone, the +1 damage, +1 health is what I mean when I say that, and then also an on-death mechanic, which could be adding armor to something, adding armor to the hero, and then so on and so on and so on. So yeah, although I understand this, I understand why this is in here. I just never take it. So I think they've just made it happen even more often because it's after any minion played now instead of any minions summoned. Yeah, because played maybe certain units. I think this is also means it's had a slight buff in that certain minutes summon things on combat start. So maybe they've made it so everything gets affected by this and not just the ones that you play out your hand. But anyway, just avoid that at all costs. For me, it was very infuriating. So redeem a pirate minion, bank its equal cost. So redeem a pirate that costs 5 or less. Right, okay, so they were redeeming probably high cost. You're getting probably, it's not even something like this, you're redeeming a high cost minion as well as getting the glimmer for it. Okay, fair enough. They've nerfed that slightly. They've made this cost 8 less, and one of the things, 8 less. Sorry, they've reduced the cost of this. I have played with the Dragon Brand card before. One of the things they have added now, they've made like it looks like a game wide change. Is that certain cards that revive minions, instead of it being in adjacent spaces, i.e., you've got 4 tiles and then you lay your card in the middle. Well, sometimes if you're not going to play this, high cost unit until much later in the game, and some of your tiles have been used, some of your tiles are defending, but most of the tiles are being already taken up. So sometimes I was finding that I was waiting to play this just so I could specifically lay it in a place where I would get the benefit of both tiles, because you need 3 empty tiles in essence to play it. But now, 3 empty spaces, I should say, to play it. But now they've made it adjacent columns. So I interpret that as, if you imagine you can play it here, and then you've got the 2 tiles either side, it can go anywhere. The minions can go anywhere in these 2 spaces. So there's an extra 2 spaces it could form in. So if that does work in that way, and with a slight cost reduction, and the fact that you probably can be able to get this more often, it's going to make endgame quite a lot more fun, or engaging, I should say. But I do like that change. After your glimmer is used for damage, okay. I've not played with a glimmer deck, so I can't really speak of whether that's good. It seems that they've nerfed it slightly. They've taken away the plunder, summon a belly brute. So on direct damage, then she would summon a monster to her side. So maybe that's a nerf. I don't know if you can actually play this. And maybe it's just the boss that does this. So Reduce cost of all servants on the end by 1, reduce their cost by 1. Okay, so a slight buff to the encore. If you've already got Serpent Songs in your hands, they also get reduced by 1. Cool. Again, this is the same, going back to the same one. Nothing's really changed with this apart from it now goes in adjacent columns instead of adjacent spaces. Goldman says its health reduced by 4 to 2. I'm trying to think what that one is. That might be, I think that's the unit that it's in the golem deck, that when you play a golem while this monster's down, it gets a +1/+1 for playing it. So that's probably a quite big nerf, but it remains to be seen. So Ironclad Contract, start the game with it. Armor Fairy, start the game. At the start of the game, summon an Armor Fairy. Oh, interesting. I've not seen this actually. But the difference of summoning one means you're already blocking a tile, and you don't have to wait, because Armor Fairy, I believe, is a 3 mana cost unit. So it means that you're not having to use your mana in the early game to summon it. Okay, big W there. Never seen this before. Release Admiral Brass, but it looks like they've reduced the cost of it and reduced the health of it to, it's an on-death mechanic, you want this thing to die. So they made it easier to die. Sounds cool. Mosh Pit, I'm not really going to cover because I don't, again, not play with this archetype, so I don't necessarily know. They've changed this. The only change they've made to this is now in adjacent columns instead of adjacent spaces. Again, going back to the 3 spaces being clear. So fine, good change. I'm really happy to see this actually. So Hothead Swift Strike is focus 5. So what this means here, you can kind of read it in that. This is the hero of the balance / flexible faction or mercenary. And what I was finding, there's a clip on my Twitch, and it's happened multiple times, even outside of the ones clipped, is this would sit in my hand for 5 turns. I draw it really early on. It's a 3-cost mana, so you can't play it straight away. And it'd sit in my hand for 5 turns. I'd eventually finally get the focus, the separate, the additional effect activated. And then when I eventually laid the unit, which costs mana as well, and got everything in action, a tip as well is to play it on the far right, because then it can, as you're in the battle phase, the mechanics activate from left to right for the player. Certain minions might die, or you can force certain interactions, and it'll get to attack multiple times. Similar with the Brawler as well. The Brawler, it gets +1/+1 on every minion death. Have it on the far right, and it will gain, as things die, it will gain more and more. Anyway, what I was getting to is I'd spend the beginning portion of the game, so the first 10, 5 turns of the game. This is even if I draw it straight away. It then sits in your hand for 5 turns while you try and activate the minion dice thing, which isn't always, you're not always able to do consistently as well. And then as soon as you lay it, something would die and it'd take a random bit of damage, a 50/50 from the frost minion that does damage on attack. And it would just insta-die. It was so useless. It felt like when you did get it in and did get it going, it was amazing. But most of the time, it just didn't. It took so long to set up that it didn't feel valued. So given that a slight change is really good. Cost decreased, health decreased. So they've made this slightly Infinite Rift. Yeah, again, I've only played 1 or 2 runs with. This is the hero from the res deck, the spellcaster deck, and I never actually got to. I think I only ever got to play this hero itself once. Seems very costly for what it actually does, but it probably would be super fun late game, because I prefer low cost and rush, whereas you're playing for late game with spells. Never seen this unit, so we'll skip. But in essence, nothing really got changed with it. It looks like, again, it's just the adjacent columns instead of spaces. The bomb deck people are laughing because they've become even more powerful. When they draw a bomb, you get +2 armor instead of +1. So a slight buff to them. I didn't play the bomb deck, but fine. Doesn't seem that bad. There were many occasions when you could play Necro Hammer with a balanced deck. And yeah, at some points I was running around with 30+ armor in a fight, quite consistently. So giving a buff to the bomb deck, I don't think is out of turn here. Obviously, the devs have the data for whether it's performing or not. And then lastly, they'll destroy minion in your opponent's deck. So this is what I was talking about. There's a deadly fight that is has both the shark that eventually the enemy lays and this. So all that would happen is that on every turn, one of your minions dies, and then when eventually they lay the shark, 2 of your minions were getting sucked out of your deck, and there was nothing really you could do about it because you can't block a relic either. There's no way that turns off a relic for a fight. There's no blocking card or a silence on relics. It was very powerful, but now it's destroy a random card in your opponent's deck that costs 2 or less. And Steel Chomps had the same problem as Blood Shark. It felt bad. We've since updated it to not only give it a limit, but also to introduce counterplay. So counterplaying that, you just take a couple of higher cost units and they're not going to be affected, which is again really good because all that would happen is in the hard fights and in my hard runs on the Tusk Tales, I would just skip this fight entirely because there was no need to do it, and I wasn't bothered about the ranking at that point, about trying to get S rank. So that kind of covers it. Overall, really good. Just W's across the board. I would describe that as, and I believe in next year, early next year, they're going to be bringing out additional mercenaries, which is going to be nice. More gameplay to the game. So I'm really excited for what the future of the game. I'm assuming eventually they're going to have a PvP mode. So thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. If you've got any comments, and if you're enjoying the game, what's your favorite faction? If you want to see more news like this, if you want me to go in more detail about certain things, then sure, I can always do so. Stick it in the comments there. And I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. And thanks for your time. And see you soon. I will be streaming tonight from 9 p.m. GMT, and I will hopefully be playing Cross Blitz if it loads on my poor computer. And I hope to see you in the stream, and we can all have a good time together and enjoy the game. Okay, bye for now, guys. Thank you.